Today I'm going to come to you and talk to you about how to make money using debt. Now you may be asking yourself, Will, how in the hell can you make money using debt?
How?
And I'm here to tell you it's possible. I can almost promise you that your favorite entertainer, your favorite rapper, your favorite business mogul has leveraged debt to make money. Did you actually know that Airbnb was started using debt? Did you know that PayPal was started using debt? Twitter was started and scaled and became $1 billion business model using and leveraging debt. See, here's the thing. First of all, we have to understand that there's different types of debt. Now, I actually break down something called the 3 different debt structures. And once you understand the debt structures, you will see exactly what I mean. The first debt structure is what's called unstructured debt. This is what a lot of people seems to get into. It's also commonly referred to as consumer debt. See, this is when you go out and borrow money and you utilize it for consumer purchases. So you're buying the house you're living in. That's not making you money. You're utilizing it to buy the car that you're driving in. That's not making you any money. You use it for vacation. You use it for happy hour. You use it for all of the things that make you feel good in life. That's essentially what unstructured debt is. Anything that is tied to debt or to credit that does not make you money, it is considered unstructured debt.
Noted.
Now, the next debt structure is called restructured debt. A lot of people may not be familiar with restructured debt is, but in layman's terms, it's actually considered as bankruptcy. That's right, the dirty B word, bankruptcy. Now, I know a lot of people are scared of bankruptcy, but did you know that some financial individuals who are very financially savvy actually utilize bankruptcy or structured debt as a tool? And here's what I mean. People who are wealthy, who file bankruptcy, it's not because they're going broke, it's because they're protecting their assets. And so when you file bankruptcy, a lot of the times it's because you're trying to protect something, or you're being sued and you're trying to protect whoever is suing you from coming after some assets. On a personal side, when you're restructuring your debt, your asset may be your income. Now, disclaimer, I am not an attorney. I've never, said that I was. This is not financial advice. Basically, I'm sharing to you, if Will Roundtree was in this position, what Will would do if his wages, meaning if I was working a corporate job and my debts got in over my head, or my creditors are trying to sue me, obviously my assets not only are my home, potentially my vehicle, but then also my paycheck, my income. So filing bankruptcy to protect my assets may be a potential strategy that I'm using. That's restructured debt. Now, on the business side, restructured debt is because maybe I got into a bad business deal. Maybe something went bad. Maybe someone is trying to sue this particular business. A person may restructure their debt or file bankruptcy to say, hey, you can't get anything. You guys may be familiar with this, a rapper who's from Queens. You may or may not have heard of him. They call him Curtis Jackson, aka 50 Cent. Now, when he filed bankruptcy, it wasn't because he was going broke. He was protecting his assets because he actually had got into a bad business dealing. People try to sue you all the time. We live in a very litigious society. And I've seen people sue someone because they shook their hand too hard.
Shake my hand.
Look, you just never know. In the world of business, it's rough out here. People are hungry. And so when their sharks are coming out to play, some businesses have had to use this restructuring of debt to protect their asset, which is the revenue from that particular business or the assets in the business. Okay, so we've talked about 2 of the debt structures: unstructured debt, which is tied to consumer debt. You have restructured debt, which technically is just bankruptcy. And then how do you make money using debt? Is by learning a strategy called structured debt. You might want to grab your pens and papers for this one. So now, all wealthy people utilize structured debt. You just never heard it in that terminology. You may have heard the term OPM, other people's money. Essentially, that's structured debt. See, let me break this down for you. So I go to the bank, I leverage my business, and I'm going to get a line of credit for, let's say, $50,000. Okay. I'm going to take a portion of that $50,000, which the $50,000 is debt, because eventually you got to pay it back. So now I'm going to take a portion of that $50,000 and go invest it into, let's say, an investment property or into my business or whatever the case may be. Okay. So now I take 20,000 of that 50,000 and I'm going to invest it in something that's only going to make me money. It's very important to know that. I have this thing where I talk about the cost of money. A lot of the times people get so wrapped up in unstructured debt because they don't know the cost. I've actually asked hundreds of people who've put themselves over their heads financially and that are in mountains of consumer debt. And I said, what do you think it was that kept you from being financially disciplined? And how did it get to this point? I've talked to people who had as much as 150,000 in consumer debt, not just from their home. I'm talking about credit cards, personal loans, etc. Almost all of them have said because it didn't feel like real money. See, one of the things I've learned is that when it's somebody else's money, you don't mind spending it. But you have to know the cost of it. And when you buy things that don't give a return on that value, you put yourself in a bad position, or as I call, financial ruin. But one of the things that I try to teach a lot of my clients is that every dollar should be looked at as an employee. So if I have $1, I have one employee. If you have $100, you potentially have 100 employees. I just told you for this particular example, utilizing structured debt, we have a line of credit for $50,000. So essentially I have 50,000 employees that I can go and employ. This is how you make money leveraging debt. So I'm going to take 20,000 of that 50,000, invest it into something that is going to make me money. So let's say I'm going to utilize it for an investment property. Okay. So I already know that as an investor, I have to put down a minimum of 20%. So for this said example, let's say that the investment property is $100,000. So I know that I got to bring 20% down. I'm going to take 20% out of that $50,000 line of credit to buy said property. So now the bank is going to finance the other 80%. Only got to bring 20%. Okay. So now the reason why it's hard for a lot of people to get into real estate, because they just see the purchase price is $100,000 and they're sitting there scratching their heads thinking they have to come up with the entire 100,000. But just remember, I have 50,000 employees that I can employ and deploy. And out of that 50, I only need 20. This is the power of credit. This is the power of structured debt. So I'm going to employ 20,000 employees, deploy it into this investment property. We only have to bring 20%, which is 20,000. And now the bank is going to finance the other 80,000. So now I have 100% of debt into this property. That means this property costs Will Roundtree nothing out of his actual pocket. Now you may be asking yourself, well, Will, how can I make the money back to pay the debt on that 20,000 as well as the mortgage? Well, this is why I teach people how to invest in rental properties that you can rent out. Now, prior to doing the deal, I've already done my calculations. I've already calculated my ROI, which stands for return on investment. So I've already predetermined how much income this property is going to pay me. So let's say for this said example, this property is going to pay me $1,500 a month in rent. Okay. Now the 20,000 I took from the 50,000, because when you have a line of credit, you only pay back against what you borrow. So even though I got approved for 50,000, I only borrowed 20. So I'm only paying back against the 20. Now, the other 80,000 on that property is also debt. So let's say the 80,000 cost me, $500 a month, and the 20,000 I borrowed on my credit card cost me $250. So now the 80,000, it cost me $500 a month. The 20,000 cost me $250. That means my total debt servicing for the money borrowed is $750. Now, if we remember, we said the property is making $1,500 per month. That means whether it rains outside, whether I got a stomach ache, a headache, this property is going to pay me $1,500 a month. So what I'll do is I'll get my rental income, I'll pay the mortgage, I'll pay the credit card payment. Of course, there's some other fees, but just for the sake of this example, I still have over $750 left. So now, could you imagine doing that multiple times? Could you imagine doing that once every month? Could you imagine doing that and only buying one property per year over the next 15 years? I say that because a lot of the times people look at real estate and think it's a get rich overnight. No, you say people buy real estate to build generational wealth, but understand the wealth isn't necessarily for the generation you're in. It's for you to leave for your kid and your children's children. That's how we need to start thinking. But could you imagine how many scenarios or opportunities you've come across where where you just looked at the totality of the dollar amount of what it costs to get into that deal or into that property, but you didn't know that you could have leveraged debt, aka credit, to get into that deal. We can even look at purchasing and acquiring a business. Did you know a lot of the times you can go to the table with only 10% down and get an SBA loan to finance the other 90%? So let's say you had a business that was selling for, let's just say $400,000. You only got to bring $40,000 to the table, and then SBA can finance the other 90% of that. And the profits from the business is going to pay the debt back to SBA, as well as paying the debt for the 10%. And guess where the 10% came for that $400,000 business?
Oh, credit cards.
That's right, on your credit card or on the line of credit. This is why these strategies are so important. The strategies that I've just walked you through are so important because most of the time when we think of debt, we think of the bad parts of debt. We think about the consumer debt, but that's because we've only been conditioned to think of debt in a negative way. But did you know when wealthy people use the term debt, especially structured debt, they understand that debt can equal wealth. They understand that debt can create wealth. It has to be tied to structured debt, but then you also have to know how to mitigate your risk by making calculated risk and tying the debt to an income producing asset. You may want to write that down. Try saying that fast 3 times. Income producing asset, income producing. Anyways, just know that debt can make you a lot of money when you understand the strategy. Now, before you go out there and try to practice that concept, I often talk about what I call my 4-step Roundtree Methodology. That is offense that you need to know, as well as the defense on how to build wealth utilizing this concept. And so step number 1 is mindset. The reason why mindset is so important is because you have to pretty much unlearn everything that you've learned about debt. And that is because, unfortunately, most of the debt that most people have is debt that doesn't make them money. You got to change your concept of thinking when it comes to debt. Secondly, when it comes to mindset, you have to now learn how to change your mindset to be financially responsible. I get it. Let's say you're 27, let's say you're 37 or 47, or you may not have been financially responsible up until whatever age you are. So now you get access to $50,000, you get access to $150,000 of OPM. You're going to go, wow, you may not know what to do with it. And so that's why you have to change your mindset and be open to wanting to learn how to be more financially fiscal and financially savvy. Step number 2 is credit. You got to understand the power of credit, how to leverage credit, why credit is important, and not just looking at credit from a consumer standpoint. I know a lot of people who get credit just so they can go buy a house and a car and buy a couple shoes and take some trips. And that's because you can finance trips now, not just on a credit card. You can make 4 payments to go to Miami. Look, it's getting out of hand out here. So that's why you have to make sure and ensure that you have the right mindset not to abuse the credit. So step number 3 is understanding funding, financing, and the cost of money. The reason that's important is because I see a lot of people who go out there and get a lot of lines of credit, gets a lot of credit cards for their business, and they go out there and try to do things testing the waters. Look, your credit is not to go out there and test the waters. You want to utilize and make calculated risk, and you can only do that when you know how much the money is going to cost you, so that way you can park it to something that is going to give you a predictable stream of revenue. That means you already know how much it's going to cost. So if I buy said property, I already know it's going to make me $1,500 a month. And based upon what I borrow, I can calculate how much it's going to cost me per month. I just reverse engineered that. This is why I only buy businesses that are already making money. I don't invest in startups. First of all, they have the lowest rate of success. And then I'm not in the business of trying to test it out. I'm trying to, keep my credit good. I'm trying to, make sure I can go back to the banks and get more money and buy more things to make more money.
Somebody say make money, money, make money, money, money.
And so if I know that this business is selling for $500,000, but it's generating $180,000 a year in revenue, and I break that down, so that's going to tell me exactly how much I'm going to make per month. And then I know how much it's going to take me to acquire that company. And based upon how much it costs for me to pay it back versus what the company makes per month, I've already set a calculated risk to predetermine my revenue, so that way I can service my debts. And that is overstaying understanding the cost of money. And then lastly is asset building. See, this is where wealth truly comes into play. See, unfortunately, we've confused making money with building wealth. Wealth has nothing to do necessarily with the amount of liquid money in your pocket or your bank account. As a matter of fact, the longer it stays in your pocket, you eventually gonna spend it, and the longer it sits in your bank account, the bank gonna spend it. It's called interest fees. And then eventually you end up spending it, so now you have even less than what you put in there. But see, you gotta learn how to start parking your money in things that are gonna make you money, which are assets, and that is the only way you can build wealth. And I always say the layman's terms of wealth is an accumulation of assets. And this is why I say we have to understand economics. So with that being said, hopefully you've learned something in this video. You've learned how to leverage debt to make money, how to build wealth with debt, to position yourself, and just know no matter what you do or what you take from this video, yes, there's a level of risk involved, but what I try to teach you and what I teach my mentees, you want to position yourself to take calculated risk. Because look, guess what? You take a risk every day going in to work at somebody's company who can fire you at a moment's notice. And we make risk all around us. So I'm trying to teach you these strategies to put you in a better position financially, so that way you can build the wealth that you say that you wanted to build and that you told your family you were going to build every December 31st at midnight every single year. So with that being said, family, for more information on how to leverage your credit, on how to build business funding, on how to acquire assets and live the financially savvy life that you promised your inner child and that you've promised those around you, I need you to like, comment, and share. And more importantly, I just want you to know I've been in this industry for over 10 years. So this isn't something I just tried out. This is something that I'm actually living. And more importantly, I'll see you at the top. Let's go.